Okay, recording's
There we
on.
go. All right. Thanks, Scott. So good afternoon, everybody that's here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tyler Sweat. I'm the Accessible Media Specialist, the Iowa Department for the Blind. Well, it's through the Iowa Library for the Blind. So before we get going, one thing I wanted to just announce, if you guys haven't heard yet. So for the ILA conference coming up in October, we are doing a pre-conference event at our Library for the Blind. We're like 3 blocks away from the Marriott where it's happening downtown. And so we're going to have a lot of different topics that we'll be doing and kind of giving tours of our facility and kind of showing how we do what we do here. So that's something you're interested in, feel free to check it out. We will provide parking as well as lunch. So if that's something you want to do, it'll be I think, Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it'll be Wednesday. Is that right? Or is it Wednesday?
Wednesday, October 6th.
Yes, the 6th. Okay, perfect. And it looks like Rebecca said she already registered, so that's good. So yeah. Check that out. So should be a fun day. So today we are diving into Universal Design for Learning. UDL is what you'll usually see it as. For presenting, it's me and Leslie today. So I'm giving the presentation and Leslie's going to be hanging out in the background, helping with questions and anything else that you guys might have. So for those of you that haven't been to these before, a little bit about our library. We provide books and other materials in alternative formats to Iowa residents of all ages who are unable to read standard print material. So we have our eligibility. So blind person, people with visual disability, people who are unable to read or unable to use standard print material as a result of physical limitations and reading disabilities and everything that kind of falls under that umbrella. So today we're going to go over what is Universal Design for Learning, examples of Universal Design for Learning, how you guys can use it in the public library system. That'll be kind of the big chunk of it. And then the impact. So I have a lot of different resources and other things that I'll guide you guys to kind of check out that hopefully give you sort of a better understanding of what UDL is and how it works. So for the basic dictionary, I guess, definition of UDL, it's the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. This approach offers flexibility in the way students access material, engage with it, and show what they know. So the biggest thing you do see this in is education. So if you change students to patrons, it would work just the same. The way patrons access material, engage with it, and show what they know. If an environment is accessible, usable, convenient, and a pleasure to use, everyone benefits. By considering the diverse needs and abilities of all throughout the design process, Universal Design creates products and services that meets people's needs. Simply put, Universal Design is good design. So that's kind of like what the starting point. And the biggest thing that you're going to keep hearing me reiterate and looking at these resources throughout is starting from the beginning and focusing on meeting everybody. And I'm going to keep coming back to that, where it's important that you build the environment for everybody. Therefore, you don't have to come back and fix things later. And so that's the really sticking point that I'm gonna go on here. So this is a great quote. So when speaking of disabilities, the blind and their needs are most often used as an example. It is deceivingly simplistic, since accessibility is something most of the population can benefit from. And so, different things that from an accessibility standpoint for blind patrons that, they can really help everybody. And I think that's the one thing to realize is that when you build it correctly, that it can help a large group of people. So we're going to kind of go over some just really basic examples to kind of get you thinking about what we mean by this. So one of my favorite ones is curb cutouts. So these were installed in Michigan. So around the University of Michigan in 1945, they were for vets coming back from World War II. So coming back in wheelchairs and, just from being in World War II and allowing them to cross the street. But if you really think about it, they had a much larger reach than just helping these vets. So you think that people that are in wheelchairs that didn't serve in World War II, right? They would use it. even something as basic as a mother with a stroller, right? She would be able to use that curb cutout. And so it helped a large group of people with a really simple idea of just ramping the curb. Not only does it help them get down onto the street to cross, but also, when you build streets out, it tells people where to cross. It gives them sort of direction on this is where I need to go. And also, if you notice on the bottom of the curb cutout, those ridges. So like around downtown Des Moines, we have truncated domes is what they called. So there's like those little half domes that are on like that mat right at the curb cutout. And those are literally, they are designed for blind people. So when they come up with their cane, they hit the truncated domes. It sounds way different. It feels way different. So you're at where you need to cross. So those are also another thing that can kind of help guide people to where they need to cross. So it's making everything safer. Anyone can use it, and universal design. So now like cities are planned out with curb cutouts. And so that's just kind of a cool thing when you think about that. Another good example is to think about doors. So like your standard doorknob is not accessible to everybody. Some people don't have access, or, they don't have the motor strength to turn the knob, or they're in a wheelchair and can't get to that doorknob. So then you have like the more straight knobs that, it's a down. So then if you don't have to grab and turn it, you could just hit it with your hand, and then that would cause it to open. While that's better, the most accessible when you think of from a universal design perspective, it's an automatic door, right? So you're eliminating all of the barriers for everybody. Literally walk up to the door and the door opens. Okay, so that's kind of another good example of that, of just like creating a system where everyone can use it, and you don't need anything special to do it, right? So those are the two like sort of good examples that I like to kind of point out that I think really kind of bring it into focus. So within Universal Design for Learning, it's split into 3 sections. So we have engagement. So that's the why of learning. So stimulating interest and motivation in learning. So that's just getting them excited about what you're doing. So it's, finding out what your patrons like. It's finding out what motivates them to come into the library, what motivates them to learn. Okay, so that's, and that's just knowing your audience pretty much is what engagement is. So that's just figuring out where to go from there. It's just what they like and don't like, and how you can get that to them. Then the next section is representation. So that's the what of learning. And this is the most important in a public library arena. So presenting information and content in different ways. And we'll dive a little deeper in that, but it's having more than one way to kind of take what you're presenting and just have it accessible for everybody. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to, I think sometimes people hear that and they think, well, that it's going to cause more work by having to have all these different ways for the same content. But really, if you build it right the first time, you're not just doing it the same thing over and over again in different formats. It's just how you build it into the format that you already have it. If that makes sense. We'll kind of dive into that a little bit with some resources and some other things. Then the last one is action and expression. So that's offering different ways for learners to express what they know. So this, if you have an activity in your library, it's just having different versions where, so let's say you have a youth activity and you read a book and you want the kids to draw a picture. You could also give them a different option if they want to jump on a computer and type out a story or what they learned about the book. So that would be just a really basic example of that, where then the patron gets to pick how they want to show you what they know or what they had learned about whatever the activity was, whatever the book that you might have been reading in the library. So that's what we mean by action and expression. So these 3 all kind of really integrate together to create like we talked about at the beginning, of an environment that is just accessible for everybody and everybody could use it. And I think this is kind of a great way to split it up, where you get them excited, you give them a bunch of different ways to learn about it, and then you give them a bunch of different ways to show you that they learned something or express what they know about that topic. So this report, it used to be on this awesome infograph, and I've been trying to find the link for about a week and a half now because this link got broken and I can't find it, so I got taken down. But I'll kind of talk about it. So Oregon State, it was back in 2017. They surveyed 2,000 students, a little over, and this was over 15 public and private universities. And they were just looking at perceptions of captions and transcripts. So that's, is your professor using transcripts or captions in videos? How do you use them? And what benefit do you gain from them? And it was really remarkable that you see that, over 50% of the students that they surveyed say that they use it to help with comprehension of whatever they were learning. Just having access to captions, having access to transcripts just allowed them to sort of soak in the information in a different way. And so that was the biggest chunk, but then you also had other chunks, like smaller groups that English isn't their second language. So that's why they use captions, because hearing it and reading it at the same time helped them process it better. Or for a transcript, they could go back, they could look at it later to kind of help them process the information. And then there was also students with hearing disabilities that, they couldn't hear the video, so they could read the transcript. They could read the captions up on the screen. The big thing it just kind of shows is, something as easy as captions, which YouTube, like all YouTube videos, have auto captioning. It's gotten a lot better. It's not quite 100% there. So sometimes you have to go so when I put YouTube videos up, sometimes I have to go back and kind of fix some things on the caption side because it'll jumble some words together. But for the most part, it's pretty good. But you could turn that on for every video, doing something as easy as clicking a button. That makes the video right there for everybody, because it's up there and done, and then it's done. And so if we go back to here, talking about presenting information and content in different ways, you've done that. You're showing a video, and then you had the transcript, or you have the captions that go with it. So boom, you're presenting your content in different ways. So that's why it's when I think, a lot of people run into that one thinking they have to have it a bunch of different ways. That's what I'm saying by that it's not, some of the ways are pretty simple to kind of get around and make it better for everybody. So when we get into UDL and libraries, we have a bunch of different things we're going to talk about here. And always feel free to ask questions. I know we're not a big giant group today, so I get it, but feel free to ask questions, and that so we can kind of expand on this. Or if you guys got any dying questions about UDL, we can go from there. So decisions about the collections is the first one, and this one's a little bit I know it's not as important, but I think just thinking a kind of as you purchase collections, and I'm thinking more of like youth books, like really little kid books, where you could have a book that maybe the color contrast is way off, or it's difficult to read within like a picture book with text in it. And so it's just those types of things where if you can get it in a different format, would really help, make the library a little more accessible. But that was the biggest thing I was thinking about that. What for your basic books, it's going to be less of a deal when you're talking about decisions for the collections, but those younger books are the ones that came to mind with that. Offering technology that improves the patron experience. So that's, the accessible technology and other things that it's already built in, and just sort of any way you can have the patron experience improved, that you can, it just makes it easier for everybody. Designing or improving a physical building. Now, I know you're locked into a lot of these things, but even just like the flow of a building, right? So when a patron walks in, they're right at the front desk. I know this stuff sounds kind of basic, but I remember, so I grew up in Johnston. I still live in Johnston, but so the old library was in the city hall building, and you had to walk in, and then there was like a long hallway, and you had to walk past like the police department, and then there was like 4 other doors I swear you had to go through before you even got to the front desk. Now that was the old library. They've built a new one since then, but like that kind of stuff are barriers that are going to keep patrons from wanting to come in. And so anytime you can improve your physical building for a layout purpose to kind of make it a little bit better, that's never a bad thing. And even from an accessibility standpoint, I know like talking ADA it's not really my expertise. But even, just having those ADA marked correctly and having access to them, and they don't have to like go around to the back to find the whatever ramp to get to the get to the thing to get to the other thing. So just those kind of topics of when you're trying to improve any sort of efficiency, I think are important. Managing the library's online presence to be accessible and inclusive. Now, with the PLOW websites, those are fairly accessible. I think I talked about that last time, and I've talked about that before. If you aren't using that, just making sure that your website is accessible, and things like alt text, even in your social media presence, when you put a picture up, you're putting a description of what the photo is, either if you can build it in, if there's an alt text space for it, which sometimes they have, or just putting it within the description. So on Instagram, what I see is that they'll put a description. So let's say it's a boy reading a book at the library. The description would be like photo, you would just write boy sitting in the stacks reading a book. So like those types of things are just going to make it more inclusive, more accessible, and just help grow your online presence, which is never a bad thing, because then more people are getting the information that you're presenting, and more people are just going to get involved with the library if they feel more comfortable through your online presence. Now, this is the big one. This is my soapbox that I like to stand on a lot. So making sure products and services are accessible before purchasing. So a lot of times something looks great and you say, like, this is what we want for our library. This is going to fit this need that we need. And you get it in there and you start running it, live through patrons, and you realize this ain't working too hot. And so we see it a lot more on our end, where then if something isn't purchased with accessibility in mind, or making sure that it works for everybody, that then you're now having to go back to fix those issues. So whenever you have to remediate those accessibility issues, it's going to cost you so much more time and so much more money, rather than just making sure that what you're getting as far as the service or the product is already accessible. And I think that that's just something really important. So we had a sort of online book group. I'm trying to think. I won't tell you which one it is. Like a book club sort of app. And the website was great, but the app wasn't accessible at all. It didn't work screen readers, didn't work on an iPhone with the screen reader. It was pretty junky. And so we had to switch to a different company for that because of their app. And so it's things like that, is just realizing that while the other one looked a lot nicer and it seemed a little smoother, it wasn't accessible. And so we can't use that. And so I think that's just a really important thing, is that you're talking about, is this going to meet the needs of all of our patrons before something is purchased? Because, a lot of times if you're buying a new product or something and you're going to spend a significant amount of your budget, you want to make sure that you can use it for everybody and not just, those in the middle. So that's the one that I really, really stress, just to make sure that you can meet the needs of everybody before you buy it, because it's going to go a long ways. And then training staff, making sure that they're aware on how to use. So let's say you have an iPad, they know how to use it as far as, getting the Zoom, on there, turning voiceover on, turning voiceover off, changing the color contrast. So that's just one example, but just really making sure that your staff's aware of the different things that you offer to help the patron experience. Because then you just don't want the one guy that knows, or the one, employee that knows how to do the one thing on that computer. Okay. So that's what you just want to avoid with that. So that's why training staff allows anybody in the building can help patrons that might be struggling with something, or help them have the best experience possible. So when we talk about some of the different things as far as designing our instructional sessions, so the sessions you guys are having, presenting in that information in various formats, there's a bunch of other things that we're going to kind of go over here too. So the first one is how to check your website accessibility. So that's Lighthouse, Accessibility Checker, or Wave. And I'm going to show you guys those here in a couple minutes. We'll kind of do a little deeper dive into how to use these. But Lighthouse is through Google Chrome. You can build it right into the browser, so you could check the accessibility of any website if you wanted. And it's a great starting point to be like, oh, okay, we're doing the right things, or geez, we're way far off and this website is not great. So that's a really good one to use, and it's easy to kind of look at and figure out where you're at. Now, when we're talking about technology, so stations in an instruction room that have assistive technology, so screen readers, Braille audio description or audio directions, these types of things that can make a big difference. So screen reader, if you want to go back, and I think, they have all the old recordings of these that we've done throughout the year. I did do a whole one about screen readers. And so I think that that's a really good one if you're interested in going that route of getting them on your computers. But if you have an iPad, it's already built in. If you have a Kindle, it's already built in. So I think that that's important to realize that a lot of the features from an accessibility standpoint, color contrast, magnification, are built into devices, including computers. The screen readers built into Windows 10 is not great at all. There's better options, but the magnifier works really well. It's already built into Windows 10. And then Braille, so we've done some overlay Braille for some posters before that you could put over the top, or even like trying to make some other things where you're trying to present information, just having an alternative format of that to make sure that you can reach your audience. And then audio directions. So if you have something specific that you want to get on audio, I think that's also a kind of a good way to look at it. And then use of captions on library videos. We talked about that earlier. So if you are on YouTube and you have that YouTube presence with videos, auto captions are a great one to use there. Now there are services that do it too. So if you have your own videos that you want to get transcripts for, there are programs that auto transcript them for you, but that's something to look at. I think YouTube's the easiest way, because even if you want to use YouTube, but you don't necessarily want to have it public, you can still have it live on YouTube. I store a lot of videos that we don't use on our public library YouTube page. So for example, our summer program, we send out kits to the kids in our summer program. So when they come to the Zoom meeting, they have the equipment that they need to do whatever craft they're doing that day. But what we will do is we'll also film a video of, we had a summer intern doing that craft, and then I'll put that up on YouTube and then just use the link to share to those kids that couldn't make it to that specific meeting. So that's kind of a way to help them, so then they can watch it later and go over that and then work on and do that craft, so they don't miss out if they can't make it, because we understand they can't make it to everyone. But if they have the material and then we have access to that video, it's up there. So that's the other thing about YouTube, is you can store stuff and send it to who you need to send it to. But also, if you just are showing it in the library, you could put it up on YouTube, get those auto captions on there, and it would just make it a lot slicker. So the big takeaway from this part of the presentation is when we talk about UDLs, that small changes can have a huge impacts. So, when we talk about having access to different technologies and other things, those can have huge impacts for your patrons. Starting from the beginning allows less modification down the road. So rather than trying to slap band-aids on things and make it work, if we just get it from the beginning, it's gonna have less modification, less time, less money spent, which is always a good thing. And like we talked about at the beginning, the whole focus of this is creating an inclusive environment for all patrons. And so that's the main goal. We want patrons to feel welcome in our libraries. And so I think, really focusing on UDL and making sure that you're reaching everybody is going to do that. So I'm going to go over a bunch of resources now. So let's just do a new share. I think that'll be easier. Oh, maybe not. All right, we're going to stop this one. Do we have any questions while I'm getting this other resources up? I don't see any there right now, but I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to ask away. All right, let's get that up. Back to here. There we go. Okay. So the first one is the UDL guidelines. So this is udlguidelines.cast.org. And this is CAST is the organization that came up with these guidelines. And so these, like I said, these really are focused. You'll see a lot more of the education kind of built into this, but they kind of take, the 3 topics that we talked about, and they really break it down. So they even go, access, build, internalize, and the different things that kind of go under that. So if you want to do a way deeper dive on sort of the foundations of UDL, that's a good place to start. Okay, quick question. Do you need a YouTube account to store videos? So you can use like any Gmail. So I just use my Gmail that I run the department's one through because it's easier to do it that way. So that's all you need is a Gmail account. So, all right. Yeah, so this is just if you want to do a deep dive of figuring out different things and getting ideas. So like under language and symbols, clarifying vocabulary and symbols, if you click on that, it kind of explains that and gives you a lot of different things on how to run through that to clarify vocab. So this is like way down the rabbit hole. So that's why I didn't really want to use this with you guys to kind of, really melt your brain on that one. So right now, as far as Lighthouse, so this is it's called, tools for web developers, but anybody can use this. So it's open source and it's really great. Just to run accessibility. So I have it up here in the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our department's website. And the way, once you have it built in, you literally click on it and you go generate report. And what it's going to do, it's just going to kind of work through the page, and it's going to have this nice slick report that's going to show you just the accessibility and what issues you might have with it. It's free. Sometimes it takes longer than others. It should be done pretty quick. So there we go. So, it gives you these 4 topics: performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO. So if you don't know what SEO is, that's search engine optimization. So I mean, if your performance is really, really low, it's something you might want to look at, but this is more like background stuff and other things that go along with that. So the main thing you need to look at is accessibility. So 92, not too shabby. But what I like is that it kind of gives you reasonings and what categories they fall under. So contrast, these are opportunities to improve the legibility of your content. So background and foreground colors do not have sufficient contrast ratio. So in a few spots, it's marking like right here with the dark blue and the black with the white text. So it's some places like that we're getting dinged on. And then there's a few heading elements. They're in fairly sequential order. There's just some other things in the HTML code. So there are really only 3 minor things that it's talking about. And if you don't know what they mean, that's okay too. I think the biggest thing to look at is just kind of see where you're at, and then looking into how to improve your accessibility from there. And so, as long as you're scoring pretty high, then that you're going to be that good. So, and it does tell you stuff that you passed, if you're interested of figuring out those types of things and kind of what it all looks like. So like all images have alt attributes, so that's alt text. And on all of these, if you'd want to, there is usually a learn more section. So for like this one, it'll talk about alt text and kind of what to do to fix it, or at least where to start. And so that's, and sometimes it does, it gives you the code, which you don't necessarily need to know unless you have someone that can really go through that, but it's more of a starting point. So that is Lighthouse. So Webaim is one of my favorite websites as far as some resources that they have. They have a lot of great articles and studies that they've done to kind of help with showing the importance of accessibility and showing the importance of screen readers. So I like to use it, in school settings to prove to administrators and principals and those things why you need a specific, technology piece, just because they have a lot. But one of my favorite things they have is contrast checker. So what this does is that it tells you if you pass what's known as WCAG. So WCAG is the guidelines for accessibility online. So like for this one, blue with white background passes everything, but you can kind of play around with this if you want. So if we go foreground color, we're going to let's just crank it all the way up, do that. And you can change the color as you want, and you can kind of see what works and what doesn't. So like that fails everything. It's awful, right? So it's just kind of playing around with that. So even like this one, so now that it's white on that reddish background, you notice that, so AA and AAA. So AAA is just a little bit better. But for normal text, it doesn't pass the AAA, but it does for large text. So it's just, if you're building a website or even if you're just like making a pamphlet or something that's going out to the public, using something like this is a good resource, just because it kind of shows you what colors you're using and how much that can make a difference, which it does make a huge difference. And if you want, what you're sending out there to be legible and readable with your color, this is a really important one. So this next resource, I can't remember what all this stands for, but the link is in my power slides, and I'm going to put this one in the chat as well, because this one's a really great one. So this is library accessibility toolkits, and this literally for each of these, they have a toolkit for each of these things. So we have, assistive technology, blindness and low vision, learning difficulties, library staff with disabilities, mental health issues. So it really does cover everything, and it's really, so if you click on each of those, it does like a deep dive into like what they recommend. So Zoom text is one. JAWS, I recommend NVDA because it's free over JAWS, but that's them. And just kind of the different programs that are out there. And this is, most of these kind of fall under blind and low vision, but they even have assisting patrons with hearing impairments, physical disabilities. And so just a lot of different toolkits. Now, this is a pretty amazing resource that can kind of help, really go through, what you guys need. And so under the blindness and low vision, it even talks about just how to talk to patrons, speak in your normal tone of voice, avoid yelling or speaking loudly to individuals with vision loss. This one sounds ridiculous, but I've heard so many stories of blind employees that talk about that people talk to them louder, even though they can't see, but they can hear. And so it's those types of things that you just don't think about. And we did a whole webinar, I think it was a couple months ago, about etiquette with blind patrons, but these are just a really good kind of resource to go from there. And then they also have materials, collection development, and just a lot of other resources that are out there. So this one really is a great resource for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat now, so you don't have to wait for the slides to come out or anything. So let's go, everyone. So there's that one. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, that was me looking for the report that I couldn't find earlier. So those are my big resources that we have there. And I think, just really researching where you're, when you're looking at new products or thinking of ways to reinvent the programs that you already have, I think is just really important to make sure that it is important. So, do you have any other questions? I do see Eric from Johnston Public Library is in here. I don't know if Eric worked at the old library or not, and it could just have been my elementary brain that made it seem like you had to go through like 20 doors to get there, but that could have been just me. Before my time. Okay, good. It's not just me then. All right. Yeah, it was still City Hall and PD after the library left before they kind of redid everything. Yeah. Yeah. So I got you. Yeah, good deal. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, always feel free to reach out, especially with accessibility questions or anything. Can always send me an email or any, as far as specifics that you may have. I just put my email into the chat. And even if you're, questioning about some software you guys want to buy or something, I can always willing to look at it. Most of the time when I look at something like that, it doesn't take me long to let you know if it's going to work or not. So, because it's pretty obvious on the front end. So yeah, but I hope you guys learned something today. And I hope to see all of you at our pre-conference, or at least at the main conference. We're also going to have a booth set up on that Thursday. I think so, right? Or maybe just the Wednesday night. I can't remember. Leslie, do you remember?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, we'll be there Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
For our
Okay.
booth.
Yep. So Wednesday night, because Wednesday will be the afternoon, and then Thursday all day.
Right.
Okay. Got it. All right. Good deal. Well, thanks again, guys.